The distress signal cut through space like a knife. Its strange alien sounds automatically translating into words that made Admiral Park Jin's blood run cold. The message was simple and terrifying. Help us. They're killing everyone. Please. Someone help us. The peaceful Nuvari people on their distant colony world Titan 7 were under attack. These weren't warriors or soldiers getting hit. These were farmers, teachers, and families who had never hurt anyone in their lives. The attackers were the Corvex Empire, a group of aliens known across the galaxy for one thing. They loved making other species their slaves. Park Jin stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the EU's Defiance, watching the incoming footage from Titan 7. Cities were burning. Nuvari civilians were running for their lives as Corvex soldiers hunted them down like animals. Children were crying for parents who would never come home. Admiral, his communications officer, called out nervously. The Galactic Assembly is asking us to wait. They want to try talking to the Corvex first. You know, diplomatic solutions and all that. Jin almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about what he was seeing. The Galactic Assembly was like the United Nations of space, except most of its members had never fought a real war. They believed every problem could be solved by sitting around a table and talking nicely to each other. They had committees for everything and took months to decide what to have for lunch. How long do they want us to wait? Jin asked, still watching new families getting loaded onto Corvex slave ships. They're saying at least 2 weeks, sir. Maybe more. They need to schedule meetings, form committees, and draft proper diplomatic protests. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, there wouldn't be any Nuvari left to save. The Corvex didn't take prisoners for long. They either made you a slave, or they killed you, and they weren't picky about which one. Jin had been in the Earth Defense Force for 23 years. He'd fought in the Water Wars, survived the Mars Rebellion, and commanded ships in battles that would give most aliens nightmares. But what made him different from other species wasn't just his experience. It was something deeper, something that made humans unique in the galaxy. Most alien species in the Galactic Assembly had evolved on peaceful worlds. They'd learned to solve problems through cooperation and discussion. When they met violence, their first instinct was to back down, negotiate, or ask someone else to handle it. Humans were different. Earth was what the galaxy politely called a death world, a planet so dangerous that everything on it had to fight to survive. Humans didn't just learn how to fight. They learned to enjoy it, especially when they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. Sir, the communications officer asked again, what should I tell the assembly? Jin looked one more time at the footage of burning Nuvari cities. Somewhere down there, families were hiding in basements, hoping someone would save them. The assembly would debate and discuss while those families died. Tell them we received their message, Jin said calmly. Prep all ships for immediate departure. Full battle stations. But sir, they specifically ordered us to wait for diplomatic. I don't take orders from bureaucrats. Jin cut him off. I take orders from my conscience. And right now, it's telling me that innocent people are dying while politicians argue about proper procedures. The bridge crew started moving with practiced efficiency. These were humans who understood that sometimes the right thing to do was also the dangerous thing to do. They'd all volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come back. Within 10 minutes, 12 human warships were moving toward Titan 7 at maximum speed. Behind them, the assembly was probably having emergency meetings about this reckless human behavior. Jin didn't care. Other species might call humans reckless, violent, or unpredictable. They were probably right. But humans had learned something on their dangerous homeworld that most aliens never figured out. Sometimes the only way to stop evil is to punch it in the face. And humans were very good at punching. Captain Lee Min sat in his command chair aboard the destroyer Iron Wolf, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace rush past the view screen. In about 6 hours, They would drop back into normal space and face an enemy fleet that outnumbered them 3-1. Most species would call this suicide. Humans called it a rescue mission. The bridge was quieter than usual. His crew of 200 knew what they were flying into, and every single one of them had volunteered. When Admiral Park Jin had asked for volunteers for what the Galactic Assembly was now calling an illegal military action, so many humans had stepped forward that they'd had to turn people away. Lieutenant Kim Bo, the youngest officer on the ship, kept glancing nervously at the tactical display. At 22, he'd graduated from the academy just 3 months ago. This was supposed to be a peaceful patrol mission to get him some experience. Instead, he was heading into his first real battle against an enemy known for taking no prisoners. "Captain," Kimbo finally asked, his voice trying to sound steady, "why are we really doing this? I mean, we don't even know these Nuvari people. We've never met them, never traded with them, never even heard of them until yesterday. And now we're risking our lives for them." Min looked at the young lieutenant and remembered asking his own captain the same question during his first deployment 15 years ago. Back then, Earth was helping refugees from the Centauri mining disaster, even though it cost them millions of credits they didn't have. "You want the official answer or the real answer?" Min asked. "Both, sir." "Official answer. We're upholding interstellar law and protecting innocent civilians from unprovoked aggression." Min turned to face Kimbo directly. "Real answer. Because, if we don't, who will?" Kimbo frowned. "The Assembly, sir. They have peacekeeping forces." Min almost smiled. "Bo, how long have you been following galactic politics?" "Since the Academy, sir. About 4 years." "In those 4 years, how many times has the Assembly actually stopped a military invasion?" Kimbo thought for a moment. "Well, there was the border dispute between the Althari and the Vegan Republic. They talked for 2 years, while the Althari occupied 3 vegan colonies. The vegans eventually gave up and accepted the new borders." "What about the Proxima crisis?" "The Assembly sent a strongly worded letter. The crisis ended when the attacking fleet ran out of fuel and went home." Kimbo was quiet for a moment. "So they don't actually stop anyone." "They're really good at paperwork," Min said. "Excellent at forming committees. World-class at scheduling meetings. But when it comes to actually stopping bad guys from hurting good guys, not so much." The truth was, most alien species in the galaxy had evolved differently than humans. Their worlds were safer, their societies more peaceful. When they encountered violence, their natural response was to avoid it, negotiate around it, or hope it would go away. It wasn't that they were cowards, they just couldn't understand why anyone would choose violence when talking was an option. Humans were different. Earth had taught them that sometimes talking wasn't enough. Sometimes predators only understood strength. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to stand between them and the monsters, even if it meant becoming a monster yourself. "Sir," Communications Officer Park Soo called out, "we're getting messages from the other ships in the fleet. Captain Yoon on the Thunderbolt wants to know if we've received any updates on enemy positions." Min looked at the tactical display again. 12 Corvex dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a planet. His own fleet had 37 ships, but most of them were smaller frigates and destroyers. In a straight fight, they were outgunned. "Tell Captain Yoon. We'll know more when we get there," Min replied. "And remind all ship commanders, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to save lives." Lieutenant Kim Bo studied the display, showing their fleet composition. "Captain, the odds, ... are irrelevant," Min finished. "Bo, let me tell you something about humans that they don't teach in the academy. We don't fight because we think we'll win. We fight because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes that's enough." Behind them, 36 other human ships followed through hyperspace, carrying 12,000 sailors who had all volunteered for what might be a one-way trip. They weren't doing it for glory or conquest. They were doing it because somewhere in the galaxy, innocent people were dying, and someone had to care enough to try to stop it. In the cold mathematics of space warfare, their mission made no sense. In the warm mathematics of the human heart, it was the only thing that made sense. The human fleet burst out of hyperspace like angry hornets, appearing right in the middle of the Corvex bombardment formation. For a split second, both sides just stared at each other in surprise. The Corvex had been casually destroying Nuvari cities below, when suddenly, 37 human warships materialized around them like they'd been teleported by magic. Commander Choi Han, aboard the destroyer, Soul's Fury didn't waste time with diplomatic greetings or formal challenges. He'd seen the burning cities on the planet below, watched the footage of Nuvari families being herded onto slave ships like cattle. There was nothing to discuss. All ships, weapons free. Han's voice crackled across the fleet communications. Show these bastards what happens when you mess with innocent people. The human ships opened fire instantly. Bright blue thermal lances cut through space, followed by streams of kinetic projectiles moving so fast they looked like solid beams of light. The Corvex had expected the usual pattern, a few warning shots, then surrender negotiations, then easy victory. Instead, they got a full military assault with no warning. Admiral Vextar, commanding the Corvex invasion fleet from his massive dreadnought Death's Crown, watched his tactical display in complete confusion. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever just started shooting without at least trying to negotiate first. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the unknown ships are firing at full capacity. No surrender signals, no communication attempts. They're just ... attacking. What species attacks without even identifying themselves? Vextar muttered, watching human missiles slam into his escort ships. Send them the standard surrender demand. They'll back down once they realize who they're facing. But the humans didn't back down. If anything, they got more aggressive. Captain Park High commanding the frigate, Busan Lightning saw her shields failing under Corvex fire and made a decision that would have horrified any other species in the galaxy. Instead of retreating, she ordered her ship to ram the nearest Corvex cruiser. All hands, brace for impact, she announced over the ship's intercom. We're going to introduce these aliens to human stubbornness. The Busan Lightning slammed into the Corvex cruiser's shields at full speed. The impact should have destroyed both ships instantly. Instead, the human frigate's reinforced hull punched through the alien shields and tore a massive hole in the cruiser's side before both ships. When spinning away from each other, Admiral Vextar watched this happen with growing horror. Did they just ... ram us? On purpose? Yes, sir, his tactical officer confirmed, and the damaged human ship is still firing. Their weapons are still active even after that collision. This was impossible. Every species the Corvex had ever conquered followed the same pattern. First contact, then posturing, then negotiations, then surrender when they realized the Corvex were stronger. Some species fought back, but they always retreated when their ships took serious damage. These humans were different. Commander Li Zhong's destroyer had lost its main engines and was trailing atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, but it kept firing its weapons until the very last second. When his ship finally exploded, he'd managed to take out 2 Corvex fighters with him. What kind of insane species fights until their ships are destroyed? Vextar asked his bridge crew. Don't they understand the concept of tactical retreat? The answer came when he intercepted human communications. Captain Yoon, her ship heavily damaged and listing to one side, was talking to her crew. I don't care if we're outnumbered. I don't care if we're outgunned. Those people down there are counting on us. We don't quit until every last one of us is dead, or every last one of them is gone. Vextar had conquered 47 different species across the galaxy. He'd faced armies, navies, and defense forces that were technically superior to his own, but they'd all shared one thing in common. They were rational. They understood when a fight was hopeless and surrendered to avoid unnecessary casualties. Humans, apparently, didn't believe in hopeless fights. They believed in fighting until they won or died trying. And they seemed genuinely comfortable with the dying part. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "the human fleet commander is hailing us." "Put him through," Vextar ordered, expecting finally to hear surrender terms. Commander Choi Han's face appeared on the main screen, his uniform torn and blood running from a cut on his forehead. Behind him, his bridge was filled with smoke and sparking electronics. "Corvex fleet," Han said calmly, "you have exactly one chance to withdraw from this system and release all Nuvari prisoners. If you refuse, we'll destroy every single one of your ships." Vextar stared at the human in disbelief. "You're outnumbered 3-1. Half your ships are damaged. You're threatening us." Han smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Vextar's blood run cold. "Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We didn't come here to win. We came here to make sure you lose." Dr. Song Hannah had been a military medic for 8 years, but she'd never seen anything like the Nuvari refugees flooding into her medical bay. They looked like living crystals, their translucent bodies shifting between different colors as emotions flowed through them. Right now, most of them were pulsing deep purple and red colors that her translator told her meant fear and sadness. "Easy, easy," she whispered to a young Nuvari child whose arm had been injured during the escape from the planet. The child's body was flickering between colors so fast it looked like a rainbow having a seizure. "You're safe now. The bad people can't hurt you anymore." The child looked up at her with eyes that seemed to contain tiny galaxies, and Hannah felt her heart break a little. This kid couldn't be more than 10 years old by human standards, and they'd already seen more horror than most adults could handle. Elder Luminara, the closest thing the Nuvari had to a leader, approached Hannah's medical station. Her crystalline form was over 7 feet tall and glowed with a soft blue light that somehow made everyone around her feel calmer. She'd been helping translate for the other refugees, since most of them were too traumatized to use the universal translators properly. "Dr. Song," Luminara said, her voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "we must thank your species for what you have done. We had given up hope when the Corvex ships began bombing our cities." Hannah finished bandaging the child's arm and turned to face the elder. "We couldn't just leave you to die. Anyone would have done the same thing." Luminara's form shifted to a confused yellow color. "But that is not true. Doctor resent distress calls to 47 different species. Only yours responded with military aid." "What did the others say?" "Most offered to provide refugee assistance after the Corvex finished their conquest. Several species sent diplomatic protests. The Galactic Assembly promised to form a committee to study the situation." Hannah felt a familiar anger building in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had when politicians back on Earth would argue about helping victims of natural disasters while people were still trapped under collapsed buildings. They were going to let you all die and then feel good about themselves for helping the survivors. "We do not understand anger as you do," Luminara replied. "But yes, that seems accurate." Another Nuvari refugee, this one an adult male whose leg had been badly burned, limped over to join the conversation. His translator identified him as Scholar Velinor, apparently some kind of scientist. Dr. Velinor said, his colors shifting to curious orange. "May I ask you something about your species? We have been studying your people since you arrived, and we find you ... confusing." "How so?" "You fight with such intensity, such ... violence. Yet here you are, treating our wounds with the gentlest touch. You destroyed Corvex ships without hesitation, but you risk your own lives to save ours. We cannot understand how beings capable of such destruction can also be capable of such compassion." Hannah paused in her work. It was a fair question, and one that humans had been asking themselves for thousands of years. "It's complicated. We're violent because our planet taught us to be. Everything on Earth is dangerous. The weather, the animals, even the plants. We learned to fight because if we didn't, we died. But why do you fight for others? Lum asked. Your homeworld would have taught you to protect only yourselves. Maybe, Hannah admitted, but it also taught us something else. The strongest predators on Earth aren't the ones that hunt alone. They're the ones that hunt in packs, that protect their group, no matter what. Humans just have a really big definition of what counts as our pack. Scholar Valinor's colors shifted to deep blue. What the translator said meant profound understanding. You include strangers in your pack, even strangers you have never met. Sometimes, Hannah said, checking on another patient, especially when those strangers can't protect themselves. Elder Luminara moved closer, her light growing brighter. Doctor, I must tell you something about my people. We are not like you. Violence is not just foreign to us, it is impossible. Our minds literally cannot conceive of intentionally harming another conscious being. When the Corvex attacked, many of my people simply shut down. They could not process what was happening. That's why you couldn't fight back, Hannah realized. We cannot even imagine fighting back. The concept does not exist in our language or our thoughts. We can only run, hide, or call for help. Hannah looked around the medical bay at the dozens of Nuvari refugees. They were beautiful, peaceful beings who had created amazing art and technology. They'd probably never hurt a fly in their entire civilization's history. And that goodness, that purity, had made them perfect victims for predators, like the Corvex. Elder Lumiara, Hannah said quietly. What would have happened to your people if we hadn't come? The Elder's colors dimmed to almost black. Extinction. The Corvex do not take prisoners for long. We would have been worked to death in their mines. Within a few years. Hannah nodded and went back to treating patients. Now she understood why the universe had made humans the way they were. Someone had to be willing to get their hands dirty. Someone had to be the monsters that fought other monsters. The galaxy was full of beautiful, peaceful species, like the Nuvari, but beauty and peace couldn't stop plasma bombs or slave ships. Sometimes, the universe needed its devils to fight for its angels, and humans were very good at being devils when angels needed protecting. General Krextal had been conquering worlds for the Corvex Empire for over 50 years. He'd crushed rebellions, ungassed giants, destroyed entire fleets in asteroid fields, and turned proud civilizations into cowering slaves. But as he read through the intelligence reports about humans, something cold settled in his stomach that he'd never felt before. Genuine fear. His massive flagship, the Eternal Dominion, dropped out of hyperspace, along with 237 other Corvex warships. It was the largest military force the Empire had assembled in decades, designed to end rebellions before they could inspire other species to fight back. But this wasn't really about stopping a rebellion anymore. This was about survival. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we've finished analyzing the human military database that our spies obtained from the Galactic Assembly. The results are, disturbing. Krextal looked up from his tactical display. How disturbing? Well, sir, most species develop military technology to defend against external threats. Humans developed theirs to fight each other. For their entire recorded history, they've been at war with themselves almost continuously. So they're a violent species. We knew that already. Sir, it's not just that they're violent, it's how they're violent. They have military academies where they study thousands of years of warfare techniques. They teach their officers to think like their enemies, to predict what they'll do, to always have backup plans for their backup plans. Krextal frowned. Most species the Corvex fought had basic military knowledge, point ships at enemies, shoot, until enemies surrender. It worked fine against other civilized races who followed logical patterns. There's more. Sir, the intelligence officer continued, his voice getting more nervous. Their language has 37 different words just for types of explosions. 37. They have specific terms for explosions that happen underwater, explosions that happen in space, explosions designed to destroy buildings, explosions designed to destroy other explosions. That's oddly specific. Sir, their homeworld is classified as a Class 12 death world. Do you know what that means? Krextall did know, and he wished he didn't. Death worlds were planets so dangerous that everything on them had to be either a predator or something that could kill predators. Most intelligent species evolved on Class 3 or Class 4 worlds at most. Class 12 was almost unheard of. Everything on their planet tries to kill everything else, Krextall muttered. They evolved in constant warfare. Yes, sir. And here's the worst part. They have animals on their world that hunt other predators. For fun. Not for food. Not for territory. Just because they enjoy it. The humans call them apex predators, and they talk about them the way we talk about pet animals. Krextall pulled up images from the human homeworld and immediately regretted it. Creatures with massive teeth chased other creatures with claws the size of swords. Things that looked like living nightmares prowled through environments that would kill most civilized beings in minutes. Sir, his communications officer called out, the High Command is requesting your status report. Krextall activated the secure channel to the Korvax home system. The faces of 5 Supreme Commanders appeared on his screen, each one representing billions of Korvax citizens across the Empire. Report, General, Supreme Commander Vorth demanded. Have you crushed this human uprising? Commanders, I believe we're facing something unprecedented. These humans aren't just another rebellious species. They're natural-born killers who've spent their entire evolution learning how to destroy things more dangerous than themselves. Supreme Commander Klex laughed harshly. One species cannot threaten an empire that spans 200 star systems. Sir, respectfully, I don't think you understand what we're dealing with. Humans don't just fight to win territory or resources. They fight for abstract concepts like justice and freedom. They'll die for complete strangers just because they think it's the right thing to do. All species can be broken, Supreme Commander Yarth stated coldly. Apply sufficient force, and they will surrender. Krextall had been afraid they'd say that. Commanders, humans don't surrender. I've reviewed every military engagement in their history. When cornered, they fight harder. When outnumbered, they get more creative. When facing extinction, they become more dangerous than the things that are trying to extinct them. The Supreme Commanders exchanged glances. They'd built their empire on the simple principle that overwhelming force made any enemy surrender. It had worked for 800 years across 47 different species. General, Supreme Commander Vorth said slowly, are you suggesting that humans cannot be defeated? No, sir. I'm suggesting that defeating them might cost us more than we're willing to pay. And even if we win, the survivors will spend the rest of eternity trying to kill us all. Supreme Commander Klex leaned forward. Then what do you recommend? Krextall looked at his fleet of over 200 warships. Then, at the intelligence reports showing that humans had turned warfare into an art form. Then, at the images of their death world, where creatures casually hunted things that could eat, starships. Total annihilation, he said quietly. We can't just defeat them or enslave them like other species. We have to make sure none of them survive. Because if even one human escapes, they'll teach the rest of the galaxy how to fight like they do. The Supreme Commanders voted unanimously. Some enemies were too dangerous to merely conquer. They had to be completely destroyed. Word traveled fast across the galaxy, the way gossip always does. One day the Korvax Empire seemed unstoppable, crushing anyone who dared to resist. The next day, humans had appeared out of nowhere and actually hurt them in a real fight. Suddenly, species that had been quiet for decades started whispering in dark corners of space stations and sending encrypted messages. They hoped the Corvex wouldn't intercept. Commander Yang Su was reviewing supply reports aboard his cruiser Pride*, when the first secret message arrived. His communications officer, Lieutenant Zhang Wo, looked confused as he handed over the decoded transmission. "Sir, we've got an encrypted message from someone calling themselves Silent Watcher. They're offering to share hyperspace navigation routes that could cut our travel time by 30%. Yang Su studied the message. The routes were detailed, accurate, and would let human ships move through space much faster than the Corvex expected. Any idea who sent this? The encryption signature suggests it's from the Velthari Collective. Sir, you know, those insect-like beings from the Kepler sector. Yang Su knew about the Velthari. They looked like giant praying mantises, and were supposedly some of the best navigators in the galaxy. They'd been under Corvex rule for about 15 years, ever since their home system was liberated and turned into a mining operation. Why would they help us? Yang Su wondered aloud. The answer came 3 hours later, when another encrypted message arrived, this time from the aquatic Mercian species. They were offering detailed intelligence about Corvex fleet movements, including patrol schedules and supply lines that weren't supposed to exist in any database. Lieutenant Zhang Wo was starting to look overwhelmed. "Sir, that's 2 species offering to help us fight their own rulers. This doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," Yang Su replied, studying the Mercian intelligence reports. "Think about it from their perspective. For years, they've been watching the Corvex crush anyone who fights back. They probably figured resistance was hopeless, so why die for nothing? But now they've seen humans take on a Corvex fleet, and actually win. Suddenly, hopeless doesn't look so hopeless anymore." The flood of secret support started slowly, then became overwhelming. The crystalline beings of the hegemony, who looked like living gemstones, sent coordinates for hidden supply depots. The plant-like Sylvani provided information about Corvex, weaknesses they'd observed during their own conquest. Even species that Yang Su had never heard of were reaching out with offers of help. The most surprising message came from Regent Shalonix of the crystalline hegemony. Her people had been Corvex vassals for over 20 years, and Yang Su had assumed they were completely broken as a fighting force. Her transmission was longer than the others, and much more personal. "Commander Yang Su," her translated voice said, "through the speakers, my people have watched your species do something we thought was impossible. You have shown the Corvex that they can bleed." Yang Su leaned back in his chair. "Go on. For 2 decades, we have served our conquerors, because we believed defeat was inevitable. The Corvex were too strong, too numerous, too ruthless. Fighting them would only bring more suffering to our people. We chose survival over dignity." The message paused, and Yang Su could hear something like static that the translator identified as emotional distress. "But you, humans," Shalonix continued, "you have taught us something we had forgotten. Inevitability is not a fact of nature. It is simply another enemy that can be defeated if enough people are willing to fight it." Yang Su felt a chill run down his spine. These weren't just offers of support. These were declarations of rebellion from species that had been quiet for decades. "We are sending you coordinates for supply caches hidden throughout Corvex space," Shalonix's message continued. "Weapons, fuel, medical supplies. We have been preparing for this day for years, hoping someone would be brave enough to light the spark." Lieutenant Zhang Wo looked up from his console. "Sir, we're getting similar messages from at least 12 other species. Some of them are offering to provide safe harbor for damaged ships. Others are sharing technical specifications for Corvex weapons and shields." Yang Su realized what was happening. The human intervention hadn't just saved the Nuvari. It had inspired every oppressed species in Corvex space to remember what courage looked like. They'd been waiting for someone to prove that the Empire could be hurt. "Sir," Zhang Wo continued, "there's something else. Several species are asking if we need volunteers for combat operations. They want to fight alongside us. Yang Su looked at the tactical display showing Korvax space. Suddenly, what had looked like a hopeless mission against impossible odds was starting to look like something else entirely. The humans hadn't just brought 37 ships to this fight. They'd brought hope. And hope, it turned out, was more contagious than any weapon in the galaxy. Send a message to Admiral Park Jin, Yang Su ordered. Tell him the cavalry is coming, and it's bigger than we thought. The human fleet materialized around Korvax Prime like vengeful ghosts. Their ships scarred and battered from 3 months of non-stop fighting across the galaxy. Admiral Park Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Soul Vengeance, looking at the most heavily defended planet in Korvax space. Massive orbital defense platforms bristled with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Shield generators, the size of cities, protected the homeworld of an empire that had never known defeat. Jin smiled grimly. The Korvax had built these defenses to stop rational enemies who would retreat when faced with overwhelming force. They'd never planned on fighting humans. All ships, this is Admiral Jin. He broadcast to his fleet. I know what you're seeing. Down there looks impossible. Good. Impossible just means they won't expect us to try it. Captain Nam Ji, commanding the destroyer Guangzhou's Fury, checked her weapon systems one more time. Her ship looked like it had been through a blender, hull plates missing, scorch marks covering every surface, temporary patches holding atmosphere inside. She'd been fighting Korvax forces for 96 days straight, and her crew had gotten very good at making damaged ships do impossible things. Captain, her tactical officer reported, those orbital platforms have enough firepower to vaporize us if we get within range. Namji studied the defensive grid, 24 massive stations, arranged in perfect formation around the planet, each one capable of destroying a battleship with a single shot. Any sane military force would spend months planning how to take them out safely. Then we won't give them time to shoot, she decided. All power to engines. We're going straight through. The first wave of human ships accelerated toward the orbital. Defenses at maximum speed. The Korvax defenders had spent centuries perfecting their tactics against enemies who approached carefully, tested defenses, and retreated when things got too dangerous. They had detailed plans for fighting methodical opponents who valued their own lives. They had no plans for fighting maniacs who treated suicide missions like Tuesday morning errands. Incoming ships are not following standard attack patterns. The Korvax defense coordinator reported to his superiors on the planet below. They're coming straight at us at maximum speed. No evasive maneuvers, no long-range probing attacks. Then, destroy them, Supreme Commander Vorth ordered from his bunker deep beneath the planet's surface. Our defenses are impregnable. The orbital platforms opened fire with everything they had. Massive energy beams that could crack moons swept through space, targeting the incoming human ships. Several destroyers disappeared in brilliant flashes of light, but the rest kept coming. Their surviving ships weaving between the defensive fire like they were dancing with death. Captain Namji watched 2 of her escort frigates get destroyed by platform fire, but she didn't slow down. This is for the Nuvari, she whispered, targeting the nearest defense station. This is for every species you enslaved. This is for every child you murdered. Her ship slammed into the orbital platform's shields at full speed. The impact should have killed everyone aboard, but human ships were built different than other species' vessels. They were designed by engineers who assumed their crews would do stupid, brave things on a regular basis. The Guangzhou's Fury punched through the shields and crashed into the platform's main reactor. The explosion lit up half the star system and took out 3 other defense stations in the chain reaction. Platform 7 is down, the defense coordinator reported, his voice shaking the humans. They rammed it. Deliberately. Impossible. Supreme Commander Vorth replied. No species sacrifices ships that way. Sir, Platform 12 is gone too, and 15, they're just flying straight into us. Admiral Jin watched his ships tear through the orbital defenses like a hurricane hitting a house of cards. The corvettes had built their platforms to withstand prolonged sieges and careful attacks. They hadn't built them to handle enemies who viewed ramming speed as a valid tactical option. Second wave, begin your attack run, Jin ordered. Target the planetary communication arrays. Cut off their ability to coordinate. Captain Yu Min led the second wave toward the planet's surface, her cruiser Daegu Lightning diving through the atmosphere like a meteor. The planetary defense grid opened fire, filling the sky with enough energy to boil oceans. But the human ships kept coming, trading their lives for strategic targets. Sir, Jin's communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender offers from several Corvex military units. They want to negotiate. Jin looked at the planet below, where Corvex cities were finally experiencing what it felt like to be under attack. For 800 years, they'd sent their fleets to burn other people's homes, while their own world stayed safe and peaceful. Tell them negotiations are simple, Jin replied. Unconditional surrender and release of all slaves, while we turn their home world into a parking lot. The Corvex had spent centuries building an empire on the assumption that other species would always choose survival over justice. They'd never met a species that would choose justice over survival. They were learning that lesson now, one exploding orbital platform at a time. This is for every world you burned, Jin whispered, watching his ships continue their assault. And this is just the beginning. The news of Corvex Prime's fall spread across the galaxy, faster than light itself. On 47 different worlds, in slave camps, and mining colonies, and factory planets, beings who had forgotten what freedom looked like suddenly remembered they had fists. The message was simple and electric. The Corvex could be beaten. Colonel Du stood on a ridge overlooking the slave world of Gamma-9, watching something beautiful and terrible unfold below. The mining colony had been quiet for 15 years, its workers digging rare metals out of toxic soil, while Corvex overseers cracked whips and counted profits. Now those same workers were turning their industrial equipment into weapons of war. Colonel, his communications officer reported, we're getting similar reports from 36 other systems. Slaves are rising up everywhere. They're using mining, lasers as weapons, cargo haulers as tanks, even turning their work shifts into military units. Du watched through his binoculars as a group of former prisoners surrounded a Corvex garrison. They'd welded armor plates onto mining vehicles and jury-rigged plasma cutters into something that looked suspiciously like artillery. It shouldn't have worked, but the Corvex guards were surrendering anyway. How many Corvex military units are still fighting? He asked. Less than 30%, sir. Most of them are either surrendering or retreating to core systems. The ones still fighting are, well, they're getting creative. That was diplomatic language for desperate. The Corvex Empire had been built on the assumption that conquered species would stay conquered. They'd never planned for rebellion. Down in the valley, a tall figure approached Du's position, under a white flag. The translator identified him as Thane Mordok, a member of the rock-like granite people who'd been enslaved here for 2 generations. He moved slowly, the way someone does when they're not used to walking free. Colonel Du, Mordok said, his voice sounding like gravel in a cement mixer. My people wish to thank yours for what you have done. You're the ones doing the fighting now, Du replied. We just showed you it was possible. Mordok looked back at his people, who were systematically dismantling every piece of Corvex infrastructure on the planet. For 23 years, we told ourselves that resistance was futile. The Corvex were too strong, too organized, too ruthless. Fighting back would only make our suffering worse. What changed? Your species showed us something we had forgotten, Mordok said simply. Sometimes peace is only possible after war. Sometimes the only way to stop evil is to hit it so hard, it can't get back up. Du's tactical display was lighting up with reports from across Corvex space. On the factory world of Delta Tertius, enslaved insectoid workers had turned their assembly lines into weapons manufacturing. On the agricultural planet New Harvest, plant-like beings were using their control over local vegetation to strangle Corvex installations with aggressive vines. "Colonel," his intelligence officer called out, "we're getting reports that the crystalline hegemony has declared full independence. They're not just rebelling, they're actively hunting down Corvex forces in their territory." "How long has it been since Corvex Prime fell?" Beak Du asked. 72 days, sir." 72 days to destroy an empire that had lasted 1,000 years. The Corvex had conquered their first world when humans were still figuring out agriculture. They'd ruled over billions of beings across hundreds of star systems. Their military was legendary, their technology advanced, their control absolute. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that other species thought like they did. The Corvex fought for conquest, for resources, for the simple pleasure of dominating others. When things got difficult, they retreated to regroup and try again later. The species they'd enslaved, inspired by human example, were fighting for something completely different. They were fighting for the right to exist as free beings, and when you're fighting for that, retreat isn't an option. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're getting surrender requests from Corvex commanders on 17 different worlds. They're offering to release all slaves and withdraw from occupied territories in exchange for safe passage home." Beak Du thought about the Nuvari refugees he'd seen in the medical bays, the children who'd watched their parents die, the families torn apart by Corvex slave raids. He thought about species that had spent generations in chains, working themselves to death in mines and factories. Tell them the terms are simple, he decided. Unconditional surrender, full reparations to their victims, and war crimes trials for anyone who gave orders to hurt civilians. If they don't like those terms, they can discuss them with the former slaves who are currently hunting them down. The 1,000-year Corvex Empire was dying, not from external conquest, but from internal collapse. Their slaves had learned something that the Corvex never understood. Sometimes, the strongest chains are the ones inside your own mind, and humans had taught the galaxy how to break those chains. The Great Assembly Hall on Centauri Station had never been so crowded. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive chamber, many of them attending their first free assembly meeting in generations. The Corvex Empire was gone, reduced to rubble and war crimes tribunals, but the question of what came next still hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Ambassador Shinhai walked slowly toward the central podium, her dress uniform bearing the scars and decorations of 6 months of the bloodiest fighting the galaxy had seen in centuries. Behind her, the human delegation looked more like soldiers than diplomats, because that's exactly what they were. Admiral Park Jin sat in the front row, his left arm still in a sling from the final battle at Corvex Prime. The applause was polite, but uncertain. Many species weren't sure how to feel about humanity's official entry into galactic politics. On one hand, humans had liberated half the galaxy from slavery. On the other hand, they've done it by turning warfare into an art form and showing a casual disregard for their own survival that made everyone else nervous. "Honored representatives," Shinhai began, her voice carrying clearly through the chambers. "Translation systems. 6 months ago, most of you had never heard of humanity. We were a small species from a dangerous world, barely worthy of notice by the great civilizations of the galaxy." A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. That was exactly what they'd thought, and everyone knew it. Today, we stand before you not as conquerors or rulers, but as beings who believe that freedom is not a privilege to be granted by the strong. It's a right that belongs to every conscious creature in the universe. Regent Shalonix of the crystalline hegemony stood up, her form catching the chamber's lights. "Ambassador Shin, hi my people, owe their freedom to human sacrifice, but many in this assembly are concerned about your species' methods. You fight with an intensity that frightens even your allies. Shinhai nodded. It was a fair question, and one that humans had been expecting. Regent Shalonix, let me be completely honest with you and everyone else in this chamber. Humans are violent. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we learned to kill it back. We're aggressive, stubborn, and we have a bad habit of fighting battles that more sensible species would avoid. The chamber was completely silent now. Most diplomatic speeches tried to downplay negative qualities, not advertise them. But here's what I want you to understand, Shinhai continued. We didn't choose to be the galaxy's soldiers. We didn't want to fight the Corvex Empire. We wanted to explore space, make friends, maybe trade some technology and cultural ideas. She gestured toward the section where Navari representatives sat, their crystalline forms still showing faint colors of remembered trauma. Then we heard people crying for help, and no one else was coming. The great civilizations of the galaxy were too busy forming committees and drafting diplomatic protests to actually save anyone. So we did what humans do when we see innocent people getting hurt. We got involved. Elder Luminara rose from her seat, her voice like music when she spoke. Ambassador, may I address the assembly? Shinhai stepped aside, and the Nuvari elder approached the podium. Her people were among the most respected philosophers in the galaxy, known for their wisdom and peaceful nature. Fellow beings, Luminara said, I have spent months studying human behavior, trying to understand how a species can be so destructive and so protective at the same time. I believe I have found the answer. She paused, letting her words translate properly. Humans fight so others don't have to. They make themselves into monsters so the rest of us can remain civilized. They bear the moral weight of violence so we can keep our hands clean. This is perhaps the greatest gift one people can give to another. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives were arguing in dozens of languages, their translation devices working overtime. The question before us, Luminara continued when the noise died down, is not whether humans are too violent for civilized society. The question is whether civilized society is strong enough to survive without them. Admiral Park Jin stood up in the audience. If I may, he said, his battle-scarred face serious. We're not asking to rule anyone. We're not demanding tribute or territory. All we want is the right to help when help is needed. And maybe, if we're lucky, the chance to learn from species who are wiser and more peaceful than we'll ever be. The final vote wasn't even close. Humanity was admitted to the Galactic Assembly by the largest margin in the organization's history. But more than that, they were given something unprecedented, a permanent military mandate to respond to distress calls without waiting for political approval. As Shinhai left the podium, Elder Luminara approached her privately. Ambassador, the Nuvari said, your people have taught the galaxy something important. Sometimes, peace is not the absence of conflict. Sometimes peace is what happens when good people are willing to fight for it. Shinhai looked out through the station's windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, other species might be calling for help. Other empires might be preying on the innocent. But now they would find something waiting for them that they hadn't expected. Humans with ships, weapons, and an absolute refusal to let evil win through inaction. The galaxy had its guardians now, and those guardians had very sharp teeth.